You move through situations without asking for much. Often, you do not ask at all. This feels normal. It feels like how things are meant to work. You notice what is available, and you adjust yourself to that. You do not reach beyond it. You take what is offered, and you leave the rest untouched. When you need something, you pause first. You check whether it is really necessary. You check whether you can manage without it. Most of the time, you decide you can. Not asking feels cleaner. It feels simpler. It keeps things moving. You are aware of how asking might change the room, how it might slow things down, how it might make someone else uncomfortable or burdened. You sense this before words form, so the question stays inside. You keep going as you are. Your body already knows this posture. You wait. You hold back. You make do. You stay alert to what is freely given, and you work within that. This does not feel like sacrifice. It feels like order. It feels like knowing your place. In shared spaces, you rarely request adjustments. You sit where there is room. You accept what is decided. You follow the flow that is already in motion. You do not interrupt it with your own needs. This feels respectful. It feels appropriate. When someone offers help, you hesitate. You measure whether it would be easier to decline. Often you say you are fine. You mean it in the moment. You know how to manage. You know how to carry things on your own. You notice others ask more freely. They speak up. They request clarification. They name what they want. You see this clearly. You are not confused by it. It just does not feel like your way. Your way is quieter. Not asking shapes how you move through time. You anticipate limits. You plan around them. You adjust before there is a problem. You learn how to stay within what is already there. Learning not to ask feels like learning how to remain contained. You move forward without calling attention to what you need. You stay inside what is offered. You keep your questions unspoken and your presence light, carrying on without making a request. You notice how not asking becomes your default response. It shows up in small, ordinary moments. When you need clarification, you wait. When something is missing, you adjust. You look for a way to continue without interrupting anyone else. This feels efficient. It feels considerate. When you are unsure, you tell yourself you will figure it out. You do not raise your hand. You do not ask for repetition. You listen closely and fill in the gaps on your own. You would rather risk being slightly wrong than risk being a disruption. This choice feels automatic. In conversations, you hold your questions back. You wait for information to be offered instead of requesting it. If it does not come, you work with what you have. You tell yourself it is enough. You tell yourself you do not need to know more right now. You notice how quickly you adapt when something is unclear. You watch. You infer. You make quiet decisions without announcing them. This keeps things smooth. It keeps attention off you. You are skilled at staying inside what is already happening. When help is available, you hesitate. You consider whether asking would create extra work. You consider whether it would change how you are seen. Often, you decide to manage alone. You reassure yourself that you can handle it. Most of the time, you can. You notice this pattern in shared spaces. If something is uncomfortable, you shift yourself instead of asking for change. You sit where there is room. You accept what is decided. You move around obstacles without naming them. This feels polite. It feels expected. Others may not realize how much you are managing internally. From the outside, you seem capable. You seem easygoing. You seem fine. You let this impression stand. You do not correct it by asking for more. Not asking becomes a way of staying contained. It keeps you from drawing attention. It keeps you from depending on anyone else. It keeps things predictable. You know how to operate within limits that are already set. This way of being repeats quietly, day after day, situation after situation. You do not pause to reconsider it. The question of whether to ask rarely arises. The answer is already there. Learning not to ask shapes how you move through the world. You stay alert. You stay adaptable. You work with what is given. You continue on without making requests, carrying your questions silently and finding ways to proceed without needing to speak them aloud. You stay with this way of being even when it quietly asks more of you. Not asking does not end with small moments. It stretches into longer ones. It shapes how you handle confusion, discomfort, and need without ever naming them. You keep questions inside and carry on as if nothing is missing. There is steady effort in this. You pay close attention so you do not have to interrupt later. You listen carefully, sometimes more carefully than necessary. You track details. You remember instructions. You notice what others forget. All of this helps you continue without needing to ask. This work happens silently. When something is unclear, you do not stop the moment to fix it. You move forward with partial information. You fill in gaps as best you can. You adjust as you go. You accept small errors rather than ask for clarity. You tell yourself you will figure it out. Often you do. Not asking becomes a way of managing exposure. Asking would make your uncertainty visible. It would draw attention to what you do not know or what you need. You avoid this by staying self-contained. You handle things privately. You keep your questions to yourself. There are costs to this, even if they are easy to overlook. You may take longer routes when shorter ones exist. You may spend extra energy solving problems that could have been shared. You may sit with discomfort longer than necessary. You notice this at times, but you do not interrupt yourself. You keep going. You are aware that others ask more freely. They request help. They ask for clarification. They name when something is missing. You see this clearly. You do not judge it. It simply does not feel like your way. Your way is to adapt, not to request. People may come to rely on you. They assume you will manage. They assume you do not need much. You reinforce this without meaning to. By not asking, you teach others what to expect. You accept this quietly. It feels consistent with how you move through the world. There are moments when a question rises anyway. You feel it form in your body. You consider speaking. You imagine the interruption. You imagine the response. Then you decide it is not necessary. You lower the question and move on. This happens quickly. No one notices. Over time, not asking becomes part of how you stay intact. You do not depend on others. You do not risk being told no. You do not risk being seen as demanding. You remain capable, quiet, and contained. This feels stable. It feels predictable. You live inside this posture without resolving it. You do not test whether asking would be met with care. You do not check whether space is available. You remain where you are, working with what is already given. Learning not to ask stays with you. It shapes how you relate, how you solve problems, how you move through uncertainty. You carry your questions alone and continue forward without voicing them, holding yourself together by staying quiet and capable, letting the habit remain exactly as it is. You can see this way of being now without needing to change it. Not asking has shaped how you move through many moments. It lives in your timing, in your silence, in the way you adjust yourself before anyone else has to respond. It does not draw attention, it simply stays. You can acknowledge that this posture once made sense. Not asking helped you keep things moving. It helped you avoid disruption. It helped you stay capable and contained. You learned how to work with what was available and to manage without requesting more. This was a way of staying steady. This way of being has kept you independent. It has kept you from waiting on answers. It has allowed you to continue without interruption. You learned how to rely on yourself and to trust that you could figure things out as you went. That knowledge has stayed with you. You do not need to decide whether not asking has limited you. You do not need to weigh what might have been different if you had spoken up more. Those questions do not need resolution here. They can remain open without being answered. You may notice that you still hold questions inside. You still pause before speaking. You still choose to adapt rather than request. This happens quietly, without effort. It feels familiar. It feels like part of how you stay in control of your own movement through the world. Not asking does not mean you have no needs. It means you learned how to manage them privately. You learned how to stay composed by keeping your uncertainty contained. You learned how to proceed without drawing attention to what you might want or need. You do not have to stop doing this now. You do not have to ask more. You do not have to ask less. You can let this way of being remain exactly as it is, not as something to fix, not as something to defend, just as something that has been there. You see this posture clearly now. You name it without judgment. You let it stand. You continue moving forward, carrying your questions quietly, making use of what is already present, allowing this way of being to stay where it is, without asking it to change or to explain itself.